Anna Mae Blessing. It's hard enough to imagine someone with a name as innocent-sounding as Anna Mae Blessing committing a horrific crime. But it makes the story even more unbelievable to learn that she was 92 years old when she allegedly killed her son. The senior citizen made news headlines in 2018 when she came up with a deadly solution to stop Thomas Blessing from putting her in an assisted living facility. After pondering the matter for a few days, she hid 2 handguns in the pocket of her robe and fired multiple bullets into the 72-year-old's neck and face at their Fountain Hills, Arizona home. The victim's 57-year-old girlfriend got into a struggle with Blessing and eventually got her to drop the gun, at which point the murderous matron pulled out another pistol and pointed it at the girlfriend. Luckily, the quick-thinking woman knocked it out of Blessing's hand. Blessing was sitting in her recliner when police arrived and took her into custody. During questioning, she said that she had planned to take her own life after shooting her son, but was unable to after having the guns wrestled away from her. She also explained that Thomas and his girlfriend were ignoring her after returning home from a vacation and that they didn't treat her well. Blessing was charged with first-degree murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and kidnapping. She passed away in jail hospice in early 2019, just weeks before her case was set to go to trial. 9. Joan Burke. Earlier this year, police in Palm Springs, Florida, responded to a call from a man who said he got home from work to discover his 62-year-old stepdad, Melvin Weller, dead in the kitchen. Officers arrived to find the man's lifeless body in a pool of blood covering half the room. The victim appeared to have multiple stab wounds and other injuries, and the walls, cabinets, and counters were covered in blood spatters and smears. In the sink, police found several knives and a meat cleaver. A bloody nightgown and the victim's cell phone were found inside a garbage bag. The suspect, 61-year-old Joan Burke, was found laying in bed. She was reportedly alert but silent and was taken to a hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. An autopsy found that Weller had been stabbed 140 times. He was physically disabled at the time of the murder. Burke was initially charged with first-degree murder. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received a 35-year prison sentence. 8. Kermit Gable. In November 2020, a Tyler, Texas resident noticed an old man lurking around a vacant house across the street from hers for several days. She watched as he drove past the home at a slow speed and saw him walking down the steps of the home. At one point, after hearing some glass break, she called the police to report suspicious activity. One night, shortly after the concerned civilian captured video evidence of the man leaving the house, it bursted into flames. It wasn't long before investigators caught up with the senior citizen, 89-year-old Kermit Gable, who seemed to be doing very little to hide his blatantly suspicious behavior. He denied ever being at the home, but surveillance and cell phone footage connected him to the scene, and detectives found it odd that he had several gas cans and matchbooks in the bed of his pickup truck. Gable's defense lawyer challenged the prosecutor's claims and questioned the reliability of the witness who claimed to see him at the property from across the street. But a jury was unconvinced, and after just 2 hours of deliberation, they found Gable guilty of arson, adding to the lengthy rap sheet of convictions he had acquired throughout his adulthood. In 2019, Gable was extradited to Texas from Ohio after police discovered during a routine traffic stop that he was wanted in the state for theft and violating parole. Nicknamed the Silver Burglar, he's been in and out of prison since the late 1940s, when he got his start as a career criminal by stealing and selling jewelry and furs. Gable's lifetime of committing crimes finally came to a halt recently, when he received a life sentence for the arson charge. He's 91 years old and will spend whatever time he has left behind bars, where he can no longer be a nuisance to society. 7. Thomasine Bennett. While responding to a call about a disturbance at a Washington, D.C. home in 2017, police found 63-year-old Walter Clark naked, unconscious, and bleeding with his hands bound inside a hallway closet. His girlfriend, 67-year-old Thomasine Bennett, had barricaded the closet door with a 2x4. She told police that Clark had forced her to smoke marijuana laced with PCP, also known as Love Boat, and that the couple had argued because she thought Clark was seeing other women. Bennett admitted to beating her boyfriend with a metal baseball bat over the next day and a half, and Clark was pronounced dead from his injuries at a hospital about an hour after officers arrived at the scene. A witness admitted to being present during portions of the assault and claimed that Bennett held them at gunpoint and struck them on the head while they were escaping from the home. They didn't call the police and had a history of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and drug abuse, but their stories seemed to corroborate the evidence and they had a visible head wound. Bennett made a deal with prosecutors and pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter in exchange for a 10-year prison sentence and 5 years of post-release supervision. 6. James Ray Gary. While investigating an assault that happened last year in the San Francisco Bay Area, detectives matched DNA from the scene to 2 cold case homicides that had been gathering dust for years without any identified suspects. Their findings led them to 76-year-old James Ray Gary, who had probably expected to never get caught after getting away with his alleged crimes for so long. Gary is accused of the 1980 murder of Latrell Lindsay, who was found assaulted, strangled, and beaten inside her home. He is also accused of the 1996 murder of Winifred Douglas, who died from asphyxia and blunt force trauma. Once the proper technology existed, scientists extracted DNA profiles from evidence gathered at both crime scenes. It wasn't until 2012 that they connected the murders, which happened 16 years apart, to the same killer. The information was uploaded to various law enforcement databases, but no matches were found. It wasn't until police were investigating the 2021 assault that their findings broke the cold cases wide open. While Gary has only been charged with Lindsay's murder, he's expected to soon be charged in the Douglas case, and also faces charges in connection with the assault that took place last year. 5. Terry White. When a 65-year-old woman refused to wear a coronavirus mask and refused to leave inside a Galveston, Texas Bank of America branch last year, employees called the police. An officer explained to the disgruntled customer, Terry White, that although the Texas governor had recently lifted a statewide mask mandate, private businesses were allowed to continue requiring masks and to refuse service to customers who don't comply. White protested, stating that she kept her money in the bank and was going to take it out. The officer told her that she had to put a mask on before doing so, but the message didn't sink in. Finally, he asked White if she wanted to do this the easy way or the hard way, to which she replied, "What are you going to do, arrest me?" He told her yes, that he was going to arrest her for intruding on private premises, and tried to usher her out of the door while she started yelling that an old lady was getting handcuffed. White claimed that the situation was an example of police brutality, and fellow customers were quick to correct her on that. She also accused an officer of breaking her foot and went to a hospital for treatment. Police charged White with criminal trespass and resisting arrest. Just days later, she was arrested again, this time at a grocery store in Texas City after refusing to put on a mask or leave. White was convicted of misdemeanor criminal trespass and resisting arrest and received a 12-day jail sentence. 4. William Caldwell. A 17-year-old boy and his mom were riding their bikes in Adalento, Ohio recently, when an elderly man they didn't recognize approached them and asked the young man a question. He then repeatedly struck the teen in the head and body with a tire iron, rendering the victim unconscious in what officials would later describe as a completely unprovoked attack. When police arrived at the scene, the boy was still unconscious. He was flown to a trauma center in serious condition. While officers searched for the suspect, identified as 65-year-old William Caldwell, he was still in possession of the tire iron when they found him at a nearby apartment complex. Caldwell was charged with assault with a deadly weapon and booked into jail in lieu of a $50,000 bond. The investigation is ongoing as authorities seek information from the public. Meanwhile, the teenager's condition is unknown. 3. Mary Thornton. 72-year-old Mary Thornton recently visited a U.S. bank branch in Racine, Wisconsin, and was told by the manager that she was no longer welcome there. While the reasons for the decision to ban her from the bank are unclear, her reaction to the news certainly demonstrated a type of behavior that no business would welcome on their premises. Thornton allegedly spit in the manager's face, elbowed him, and walked out. The manager asked a woman in the parking lot to get Thornton's license plate number as she attempted to drive away. She ran over the woman's foot, got out of the car, and began swinging at her, according to a criminal complaint. Police were called to the scene and arrested Thornton for disorderly conduct. Her next court date is in September. In the meantime, the judge cautioned her to stay away from all U.S. bank branches. 2. Robert Engels. Garfield Niles was on his way to get his kids from school in Tamarack, Florida earlier this year, when they called him and said that a man with a gun was bothering them outside of a nearby bowling alley. The area is often used as a pickup point for parents. One of the kids began recording the white-haired senior citizen with his cell phone, and he responded by lifting his shirt to reveal a gun in his waistband and threatening to shoot the kid. The students fled on foot while the suspect got into his car and drove off. In the meantime, a bystander dialed 911 while Niles arrived at the bowling alley and trailed the vehicle. When police arrived and asked the man to exit his car, he accidentally put it in reverse and stepped out, causing the vehicle to run over his own foot. They identified the suspect as 73-year-old Robert Engels and charged him with 2 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. He was taken to a hospital to get his injured foot treated before being booked into jail. In court, Engels reportedly tried arguing that he has a gun permit, only to be interrupted by his attorney who said, "Mr. Engels, please do not. This is not the time." He's free on $10,000 bond while awaiting his next court date. 1. Roxanne Record. When Roxanne Record caught her 4-year-old granddaughter sneaking a sip of whiskey in the kitchen of her Baton Rouge, Louisiana home, she allegedly made the girl get on her knees and finish the rest of the bottle, which may have been more than half full. The defenseless little girl's mother, Kaja Record, is accused of failing to intervene as her daughter drank herself to death at Roxanne's command. She died with a blood alcohol level of 0.680, more than 8 times the legal limit for adults. Police began piecing together what happened after responding to a call about an unresponsive child at the home. Paramedics tried to save the girl's life, but it was too late. Kaja Record reportedly told officers that she saw Roxanne take the little girl into a hallway with a bottle of whiskey, and that the bottle was empty when they returned. But officers claim that she gave inconsistent statements, so her exact role in the situation is unclear. An arrest warrant states that Kaja tried to put her daughter in the bathtub when she saw that she had passed out, but she failed to dial 911. Roxanne allegedly claimed that she wanted to take full responsibility for the needless tragedy, admitting that she knows she messed up, that it went too far, and that she ruined everyone's lives, according to Law and Crime. Both Roxanne and Kaja face a first-degree murder charge in the horrific case. Since the arrest, the little girl's aunt, Ebony Record, has spoken up, claiming that Roxanne abused all her kids as children and went on to abuse her grandchildren. Ebony told local station WAFB that she partially blames herself for not speaking up, because if someone had, the child's life may have been kept out of harm's way. She encouraged others not to make the same mistake and to report abuse when they know it's going on.
10. 33-foot anaconda. In 2016, workers pillaging a jungle in Brazil came across yet another of the biggest snakes ever seen on the planet. This one was found lurking near the cave of Altamira in the northern Brazilian state of Para. Workers were tearing down trees, flattening the forest, and blowing apart anything in their way. It was during a series of controlled explosions that the snake came slithering out of the jungle, disorientated and confused. What did the Brazilian workers do? They scooped up the giant snake with a piece of machinery, wrapped it up in heavy chains, and then dangled it in the air and took pictures of it. The snake appeared to be about 33 feet, 10 meters long, maybe even more. Its body measured over 3.3 feet, 1 meter in diameter. It's unclear what killed the snake, but it was certainly dead by the time the construction workers were done with it. It could have been hit by rocks during the explosion, or it could have just died from stress and abuse at the hands of these men. Either way, nobody officially measured the snake, and so it can't break any official world records for size. But experts do say this was probably the biggest anaconda ever captured by people. 9. The biggest snake in Florida history. The biggest snake ever captured and recorded in Florida was 17 feet and 7 inches 5.5 meters long, weighing 164 pounds, 74 kilograms. It was discovered by workers with the US Geological Survey in August of 2012 as they participated in research in the Everglades National Park. It's true that Burmese pythons can get bigger than this, but only in their home territory in Asia. The Burmese pythons in Florida have the disadvantage of being on foreign soil. For whatever reason, they've just never grown as big in Florida as they have in places like Indonesia. But they do multiply at an insane rate. When scientists took this giant snake back to their lab, they found 87 eggs in its stomach, which turned out to be another state record. Sadly, the Burmese pythons are currently threatening to completely annihilate native birds in Florida. Because they can grow nearly 20 feet 6 meters long and multiply like jackrabbits, they're slowly but surely eating all the birds in Florida. They've also been recorded eating alligators and bobcats, and basically any living animal that can fit inside their jaws. 8. Texas snakes. Texas is another place in America where you can find some of the biggest snakes on the continent. A little girl found out the hard way just how scary these creatures can be. The child, just 12 years old, had to be rescued in Southlake after she got stuck in a sewage drain with 2 giant snakes and couldn't get out. It happened in 2022. 2 young sisters named Tori and Carly were outside the area around their home. Tori found a drainage pipe and thought it would be a good idea to climb inside. As she was moving into the tunnel, she saw a giant black snake. She was too scared to turn around, so she went deeper into the tunnel hoping that she could find a different way out. But when she got deeper into the pipe, she was faced with another huge black snake. It turned out to be an evil snake den, and Tori had unwittingly tunneled her way directly into its heart. Her sister ran to get help, and thankfully their mum rushed to the rescue. But she couldn't lift the heavy grate to get her daughter out of the hole, and her daughter was screaming that the snakes were getting closer. The mum had to call the Southlake Fire Department to come and rescue the child from the snakes. According to the firemen, the snakes weren't actually a threat to the child. They were only Texas rat snakes, a non-venomous subspecies, but they still grow to be incredibly big, over 7 feet, 2.1 meters in length. For little Tori, it must have felt like she'd just fallen into the snake pit of hell. 7. The Maryland House of Serpents. A man in Maryland was discovered in 2022 dead inside of his home. According to police officials in Charles County, officers were called to do a wellness check after a neighbor saw him lying on the floor through his window. When the police entered the home, they found over 125 snakes of all different varieties inside. The neighbor said he had no idea the man was a collector of rare and deadly serpents. A spokesperson for Charles County Animal Control told local news that the department bagged nearly 130 snakes, some of them venomous. The spokesperson went on to say the biggest snake in the house was a Burmese python, a monstrous creature over 14 feet, 4.2 meters long. To put that in perspective, it was only 3 feet shorter than the biggest Burmese python ever captured in Florida. And yet it was just sliming around in this guy's house. We don't know if he was killed by one of his snakes. When the police and animal rescue experts went through his home, they didn't find any of the snakes broken out of their cages. It may have just been a coincidence that it died on the floor of his kitchen. And, in the end, it ended up being the biggest collection of snakes the animal control officials had seen in over 30 years of operation. 6. Big snake, small island. What could very well be the biggest snake in the entire world was discovered in a Caribbean forest, revealed via viral video in 2021. The astonishing footage shows a serpent of unbelievable proportions being lifted up by a crane in the jungle. The monstrous beast was discovered by workers cleaning out part of the rainforest in Dominica. By cleaning out, we mean they were destroying the natural ecosystem. And while they were destroying it, they discovered a snake the size of a prehistoric monster. Dominica is a Caribbean island paradise, only about 29 miles, 47 kilometers long, and 16 miles, 26 kilometers wide. Nobody knows for sure just how many of these giants are on the small island. And we also don't know how big the snake the workers found actually was, because no one thought to properly measure it. However, it does appear to be somewhere in the realm of 15 to 20 feet, 4.5 to 6 meters long, so heavy it could only be lifted up by a crane. It could be a boa constrictor, a native species of the island. But normally, they don't grow to be any more than 13 feet, 4 meters. This one was a supernatural anomaly. When attacking its unfortunate prey, boa constrictors first bite with their sharp teeth, before wrapping themselves around their victims and squeezing them to death. 5. Huge Georgian serpent. Speaking of anomalies, yet another giant snake was discovered in Georgia, of all places. Wildlife biologists in Fort Stewart captured a huge eastern indigo snake and then posted the information and pictures on their Facebook page. They say the snake, which they caught in early 2022, was approximately 7 feet and 7 inches, 2.3 meters, only slightly smaller than the all-time Georgia record. Still, the team at the Georgia Southern University Department of Biology called it one of the most magnificent animals in the region. What you may not know is that the eastern indigo snake is the longest native serpent in the United States. This is putting aside the pythons in Florida that have no business being in Florida because they're an invasive species. And although almost 8 feet might be a pretty impressive record, take a look at the real record. Florida Fish and Wildlife claim the longest eastern indigo snake ever found in the US was 9 feet and 2 inches, 2.8 meters long. You might think a snake that long would be really heavy, but it only weighed about 11 pounds, 5 kilograms. Fortunately, these snakes aren't poisonous, so you don't have to worry about being killed by one. They're also currently restricted to southern Georgia and Florida, although scientists are slowly reintroducing them to Alabama. Stay out of the South if you don't want to worry about giant snakes. 4. The sofa snake. In April of 2021, a man in Chula Vista, California, recently came across a snake inside of his couch cushions. It was the biggest snake he'd ever seen in his life. Naturally, the man ran away. He called Alex Trejo with SoCal Rattlesnake Removal, frantic and basically crying on the phone. Alex showed up to the house, where he discovered an unbelievable Vietnamese blue beauty rat snake coiled up behind one of the cushions. In case you were wondering, this is not a native species in California. It's a non-venomous serpent that can grow to be preposterously huge and is normally found in Vietnam and other parts of Southeast Asia. This particular snake was 7 feet, 2.1 meters long, and coiled defensively on the couch, ready to lash out and strike. In fact, Alex himself had his shirt ripped by the serpent's fangs when it tried to bite his stomach. He did manage to collect the reptile and take it away, but sadly, it came down with a respiratory infection. The big question remaining was how could such a rare and unique snake from across the world end up on a California man's couch? According to Alex, it was probably an illegal pet in California owned by somebody in the homeowner's neighborhood. But it escaped and found its way to a new home, just in time to nearly scare the pants off a total stranger. 3. Prehistoric serpent bones. The world's biggest snake ever was discovered near a coal mine in Colombia. According to the US Smithsonian and Tropical Research Institute, scientists came across the fossil of the biggest snake that ever lived. It's called the Titanoboa, an ancient relative of the boa constrictor, and it lived nearly 60 million years ago. Although nobody's ever seen one with their own eyes, the few examples of vertebrae bones discovered in Colombia are proof that it existed. Jason Head from the Research Institute says the discovery of the great serpent will change the understanding of ancient climates and environments. It's also breaking the boundaries of previous evolutionary limitations. Thanks to the Titanoboa, we now know animals were bigger than life in the prehistoric days before humans. That snake was so unbelievably massive that if someone were to see it today, they might drop dead from a heart attack. The Titanoboa was roughly 42 feet, 12.8 meters long, and weighed over a ton. It was so thick that its body would hardly be able to fit through a normal doorway. The reason the Titanoboa was so big likely had something to do with the average annual temperature. Researchers say it was 86 to 93 degrees Fahrenheit on average, which is way hotter than modern rainforests around the world today. The heat bred horrifying creatures. But the truth is that we hardly know how big they really got. Only a few fossils were discovered of the Titanoboa in the Cerrejón coal mine. For all we know, these fossils belonged to a baby snake, and the mama was even larger. Or it could have been that there were other species of ancient snake whose fossils have never been found. These unknown reptiles may have been even bigger than the Titanoboa. 2. The Malaysian Monster. 2016 was a big year for giant snakes. At around the same time, workers in Brazil came across the biggest anaconda in human history. The biggest python ever discovered in the wild was found at a Malaysian construction site. It was a reticulated python, the longest reptile in the world. Local authorities said the snake was roughly 26 feet, 7.9 meters long. And while that's a far cry from the 33-foot anaconda, it would have beat the previous Guinness World Record holder as the longest snake ever caught. The issue was that the snake died almost immediately after it was captured, which disqualified it from being any kind of record holder. But it did take over 5 men to hold the snake up, and they said it weighed over 550 pounds, 249 kilograms. To show just how huge that is, let's look at the current record holder of the longest snake in captivity. The snake's name is Medusa, kept in Kansas City. Medusa is also a reticulated python, yet she only weighs 343 pounds, 156 kilograms, and is only 25 feet and 2 inches, 7.6 meters long. 1. Giant snake skeleton. You may have seen an image circulating across the internet of a giant snake skeleton twisted on the shores of a beach. It looks like the skeletal remains of a Titanoboa, or the freshly decayed corpse of an actual dragon, maybe even a sea serpent's bones washed onto the beach. But what is going on with this photograph? It generated a huge buzz online in 2022, originally posted by someone who discovered it while looking through Google Maps in March. The snake was found off the coast of France, and it really is just what it looks like you can see in the picture. It's a giant snake skeleton that can only be appreciated using satellite photos. According to Snopes, the snake skeleton is real, but not what it appears to be. It's actually a metallic sculpture called Le Serpent d'Océan, or the Serpent of the Ocean. It measures 425 feet, 130 meters, and was originally installed back in 2012. It's just that the Google Maps satellite imagery needed to be updated before people started coming across it.
Nine. Floyd and Justin Beebes. Floyd Beebes made headlines in 2008 when he was arrested and his mugshot was published, revealing a tattoo on his forehead that said, "Get her done." He told the Smoking Gun that he also had a tattoo on the back of his head that said, "Got her did." The forehead tattoo reportedly cost $125 and took about 40 minutes to complete. Beebes, a father of 8, said that his wife was less than impressed with the artwork and called him crazy. But his son Justin felt differently because he followed in his father's footsteps, getting a tattoo in the same exact place, smack dab in the middle of his forehead. And just like his father, Justin got into some trouble and has a mugshot which reveals the word psycho in plain black lettering. 8. Ronald Hayden and Abby Cat. In 2012, a father and his 2 children were arrested in connection with a slew of bank robberies in the Portland, Oregon and Houston, Texas areas, which coincided with the family's move from one state to the other. The findings came when the Fort Bend Sheriff's Office in Texas charged 50-year-old Ronald Scott Cat, his son, 20-year-old Hayden, and his 18-year-old daughter, Abigail, for robbing a credit union. In their most recent robbery, Ronald and Hayden allegedly wore disguises and even carried guns before collecting the money and getting into a getaway car driven by Abigail. Detectives managed to trace orange vests that the men were wearing to a Home Depot store and connected them to the purchase. Community member Eric Lundeen was surprised by the arrest. He told ABC News that Ronald had seemed like a solid and responsible person, and that he did a good job of being there for his kids after losing his wife and their mother. And it's true that, by all appearances, the trio lived a typical middle-class American life. But the widower quietly struggled to hold steady employment and secretly had drug and alcohol addictions, leaving him desperate to increase the family's income. Ronald lost his job in 2011 and his house was foreclosed on, and he relocated to Texas after finding a new job there. Before joining him, Hayden went to Hawaii to work at a resort, and Abigail dropped out of school and moved in with her grandmother. By then, Ronald had already committed at least 1 bank robbery in Oregon. And when the kids rejoined their father in Texas, they began helping him carry out the heists. Ronald received a 24-year prison sentence, while Hayden was sentenced to 10 years. And Abigail was sentenced to 5 years. Abigail was released after serving about 3 years, but was thrown in jail again just a year later for parole violations. Her brother and father are still serving out their sentences. 7. Caroline and Mariel Wynand. After receiving a call about a loud party in 2014, police in Naples, Florida busted the homeowner's daughter, 18-year-old Mariel Wynand, for throwing a wild bash. Officers later reported that the young woman came to the front door with the help of 2 friends because she was too drunk to answer it on her own. In fact, she could barely stand. She gave the police her mother, 56-year-old Caroline Wynand's phone number. Caroline acted surprised when she answered the phone and claimed that she was out of town. She permitted the officers to kick out anyone who wasn't supposed to be at the house. They obliged and began searching the home, during which time they found 20 teens attempting to hide. But the officers were shocked to find Caroline herself hiding inside, along with the underage kids. Once she realized she was caught red-handed, she tried to defend her decision to allow the party, claiming that the youngsters were safer with her around than they would be if they went and drank elsewhere. Police saw it differently and later said that Wynand was lucky that none of the drunk partygoers tried to drive that night. Had that happened and had anyone gotten caught or, God forbid, gotten into a crash and hurt someone, Caroline could have faced more serious charges. She was hit with 26 counts of selling, giving, or serving alcohol to a minor, while Mariel was charged with hosting an open house party. While the outcome of the case is unclear, it appears as though the pair have moved past the incident. Caroline Wynand's career as a successful realtor has remained intact, Mariel works as an actress and has relocated to Los Angeles. 6. Cornelius Johannes Eis and Cornelius Johannes Albertus Eis. 60-year-old Cornelius Johannes Eis and his son with the same name, 23-year-old Cornelius Johannes Albertus Eis, are in some serious hot water with the law in South Africa for allegedly trafficking 39 Mozambican immigrants for farm labor. The father and son duo are accused of working with two brothers from Mozambique, 34-year-old Carlos Bernardo Guambe and 32-year-old Gabriel Bernardo Guambe, who've also been charged in connection with the illegal operation. The victims were reportedly recruited based on the promise of better jobs and a better life, and were brought to South Africa from Mozambique by taxi. 7 of the 39 individuals are women and 9 are children under the age of 5, while the remaining 23 are men above the age of 18. They were rescued from a farm in the town of Belfast in Mpumalanga province. Both father and son are being held without bail, along with the Gwembe brothers. The arrest will hopefully come as a hard-learned lesson that they can't skirt around the law to save on the costs of running a business. 5. Nicole Brooks and Isis Wallace. A teenage girl's life was tragically cut short earlier this year when someone shot her to death in Bluefield, West Virginia. Police identified 43-year-old Nicole Brooks and her daughter, 22-year-old Isis Wallace, as their prime suspects. But the women were nowhere to be found, sparking an interstate manhunt that came with warnings to the public that the suspects were considered armed and dangerous, and a $5,000 reward for information leading to their capture. The search ended 6 days later in Dover, Delaware, where the pair were found hiding out in a hotel. They were apprehended by U.S. Marshals, who received a tip that Brooks and Wallace were staying at the Mainstay Suites. Before capturing the suspects, the feds worked with the Dover police to conduct surveillance and confirm that the information was accurate. Both mother and daughter surrendered without incident. They're accused of shooting their victim while targeting some adults in a parked vehicle that was stopped at a red light. Authorities believe that the deadly encounter stemmed from a previous domestic incident between Wallace and her ex-boyfriend. The man's sister had driven up from North Carolina to get him after the spat, and she brought her daughter with her. Sadly, the trip cost the teenager her life. Brooks and Wallace were extradited to West Virginia, where they both face a first-degree murder charge, along with charges of conspiracy and wanton endangerment. They're being held without bail as the case plays out in court. 4. Navasia Jones and Paul Fine Jr. On August 10, 2021, 7-year-old Julicia Batties was taken to a Bronx hospital after police responded to a 911 call and found her unconscious at home. She had no pulse and no vital signs. Doctors pronounced her dead within the hour and told police that the girl's body bore signs of trauma, indicating that someone had struck her with an object. Her death was ruled a homicide, and the medical examiner determined that she died from blunt force trauma and endured severe suffering in the hours leading up to her last breath. Following a nearly year-long investigation, prosecutors recently charged Julicia's mother, Navasia Jones, and her brother, Paul Fine Jr., in connection with the crime. They each face a charge of murder with depraved indifference, which means that they're accused of having no regard for the little girl's life, even if they didn't specifically intend to kill her. The pair were also charged with manslaughter and acting in an injurious manner toward a child. Paul, Julicia's brother, faces additional charges related to horrific allegations of abuse he supposedly committed while she was alive. Sadly, there's a documented history of abuse in the home, according to NBC New York. Fine reportedly told investigators that he hurt his younger sister because he thought she stole his snacks. But the New York Times reported that Julicia's mother, Navasia, hit the girl's head on the desk, and that she started getting sick hours later. Prosecutors have yet to disclose the full details of what happened, but they believe that both mother and son played a role in beating Julicia to death. They are also accused of failing to call 911 for at least 3 hours after the girl became unresponsive. The victim's father, Julius Batties, told NY1 News that he can't believe nobody stepped in to help his daughter at some point throughout her lifetime of suffering. Her grandmother, Yolanda Davis, said that she had tried to gain custody of Julicia in 2020 but was denied. 3. Gerardo and Leobardo Zurita. Police in Fresno, California are accusing 40-year-old Gerardo Zurita and his 19-year-old son, Leobardo, of co-conspiring in the recent murder of a relative. Gerardo allegedly drove a vehicle past the residence of his daughter, 21-year-old Stacy Zurita, and her partner, 25-year-old Raul Bobby Nunez, while Leobardo shot at least 10 rounds at the pair. Stacy and Nunez were both killed in the gunfire, which was captured on surveillance footage. Detectives have concluded that Stacy wasn't a target, but she nevertheless came into the path of a bullet. A spokesperson for the agency told the Fresno Bee that the double homicide came after a fight broke out between Nunez and members of the Zurita family. According to witnesses, a car resembling the one involved in the shooting had passed through the area earlier in the day. It's believed that the same vehicle returned later that night to commit the violent act. After the murders, the killers allegedly tried to conceal their identities. The elder Zurita shaved his head and facial hair, while Leobardo cut off his ponytail, according to Fresno Police Lieutenant Paul Cervantes. He further explained that while some of the people involved in the shooting may have ties to gangs, the crime itself was not gang-related. Authorities arrested the two men at their home and took them to the Fresno County Jail, where they were booked into custody on suspicion of murder. In addition to the charge for killing his own daughter and her boyfriend, Gerardo faces a DUI charge. The murder weapon has not yet been found. After interrogating the younger Zurita, detectives said that Leobardo was extremely remorseful for what happened and that he didn't mean to shoot his sister. But feeling sorry isn't enough. Both he and his father will soon have to answer to the law for the disturbing allegations against them. They each face 2 counts of murder. If convicted on all counts, they could receive the death penalty. 2. Lakeisha and Joshua Blakely. The lifeless body of a teenage boy was recently found at Jesse Davis Park in Douglasville, Georgia. Investigators ruled his death a homicide. They charged 17-year-old Joshua Blakely with murder, aggravated assault, possession of a stolen firearm, tampering with evidence, and making false statements. His mother, 41-year-old Lakeisha Blakely, also faces numerous charges, including tampering with evidence, theft by receiving stolen property, and obstruction of officers. The investigation into the case is ongoing, but detectives have revealed that there was some type of relationship between Joshua and the boy who was murdered, whose name is not being released as of this time. A spokesperson for the Douglasville Police Department said that they're still trying to determine an exact motive for the crime, but they have clarified that the shooting was not random. Both Lakeisha and Joshua are being held pending their next court date. Sadly, the boy's death came as the second homicide of a young person in 1 week in the Douglasville area. In the tragedy's wake, Police Chief Gary Sparks reminded the community to look out for and protect the city's youth. He specifically called on parents to know what their kids are up to, who they hang out with, and to monitor their belongings and social media accounts. 1. Tara Gates and Cassius Giles. Late last year, a 50-year-old Tennessee man named Willie Gates Jr. was arrested in connection with the shooting death of 57-year-old Jerry Yates Tiptonville. He faces a first-degree murder charge. But the crime is proving to be a family affair, as evidenced by the arrests of Willie's wife, 45-year-old Tara Gates, and her daughter, 19-year-old Cassius Giles, who were both put in handcuffs several months after the incident. Mrs. Gates and Giles are accused of threatening a witness into providing a false statement to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI. Gates faces charges of aggravated assault, coercion of a witness, criminal conspiracy, and false report. Giles was charged with coercion of a witness, criminal conspiracy, and false report. The pair were booked into the Lake County Jail, and the case is ongoing. Thanks for watching. Would you rather find out that your sibling co-conspired with one of your parents to commit a petty theft, or hear that your best friend has decided to move halfway around the world to be closer to their parents? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe.